years. There's a guy from the Washington, D.C. area who, I can't tell you what to do, but let me just suggest that I think you should pay attention to. His name is Ian Svenonius. That's a lot of syllables, S-V-E-N. O-U-S, Phenonius, something. But many years ago, he was in a band called The Nation of Ulysses, and they released great records on Discord. And then he was in a band called The Makeup, and those records are fantastic. And Ian is this wildly creative guy with brainiac parents, and we call him Ian Spiv to separate him from the other Ian in Washington, Ian Mackay. And Ian Svenonius, has a band called Chain and the Gang, and they make these fantastic indie records, and he puts them out on his label, Radical Elite, through Discord, also the In the Red label, my pal Larry out in LA. And he has yet another band called Escapism, and the new album is called Introduction to Escapism. It's my favorite album of last year. And Ian he's getting old, and he makes records all the time, and somehow his records are getting better. He's fantastic, and he's hilarious. And Chain and the Gang just released a live album, Chain and the Gang live at Third Man, Jack White's amazing label. And if you want to hear how funny and how cool that guy is, check out Chain and the Gang live at Third Man Studios. Another band just released a record last year. They're called The World. And they're from Northern California, I think. It's like a female vocal. They got a sax in it, and they make it work. It's really good. And the album is called The First World Record. I think I played every single song on it on my radio show. I can't say enough about them. A great Australian band who's on again, off again over the last few years. They answered the question, said few years. A band featuring a guy named Mikey Young. And they're called Total Control. And they're absolutely genius. Another indie band from America called X-Cult, and their best record, Negative Growth, on In the Red, I think is the best of like the 3 or 4 albums they've made. The singer in X-Cult, Chris, I'm forgetting his last name, also gets together with a great Ty Siegel, who's prolific and fantastic, and they have a band together called Dogs. And I think they threatened to release a new album this year. And so anything Ty does is fantastic. Anything that X-Cult does is fantastic. And the new album, Negative Growth, is the best of all of their records, I think. And also Kid Congo, who you might remember from a band called The Gun Club, a band called The Cramps, and a band called Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. He's been playing forever. And his new band is called The Pink Monkey Birds, a David Bowie reference from Ziggy Stardust. And it's one of the best damn bands I've ever seen. And he's very prolific, thankfully. And he releases all his amazing records on In the Red, my buddy Larry. And the records are great. And the new one is called La Araña es la Vida, The Spider's Life, I guess. And the record's great. But live, they are fantastic. And I saw them twice in 2016. I felt so lucky. Once in LA and once in Sydney, Australia on a night off. So I would recommend any of these bands, but if you want to hear more bands that I obviously like very much, I would listen to my radio show on KCRW, which you can do for free. There's a guy, an Irish guy, I'm forgetting his name, he's out of Dublin. He has a website called Rollins Archive, and if you just type in Rollins Archive, you'll go to this website where you can drag and download like 14 years of my radio show, like hours of it. He pays for the bandwidth himself. He also has Iggy Pop's great Radio 6, BBC Radio 6 radio show as well. So you get a ton of Iggy, who has amazing taste in blues, and great stories between songs. And my show from KCRW and Indie 103. And I make good radio shows. You should check out my show, especially for the price you're paying for it. It's good. The question basically says, you're famous among stagehands for a thing you wrote that's on the walls of many backstage areas. Many years ago, I wrote a thing for Spin magazine. And in 1991, I finished the Lollapalooza tour. And they said, write something that you want to leave on the wall for the next Lollapalooza bands to read. And so I wrote a thing that basically said, obey the stage manager and the stagehands. They've been here since like the dawn, building this stage that you're going to perform on. They got here before you. They're going to be here after you're gone. They should get your salary, and you should get theirs. And so they don't care if you're David Bowie or the Milkman. They just do a great and very dangerous job. Hanging lights like this, if you fall, you break your back. It's no joke. And I learned that on Lollapalooza. I'd see these men build these stages every day. Men and women swinging from rope, rappelling, sleeping on hammocks between bands because they're so tired. And I got a real great respect for a big show that gets built and broken down and driven down the road every single day and night. And so I wrote this thing, and Spin published it. And over the years, I'd be doing a show in a place like this, and someone comes up, hey, after the show, can you sign 5 of these? And it's what I wrote printed. Like, we're going to get it framed and put it in our office. I have signed that thing I wrote from here to Johannesburg. It's in backstages all over the world. And this is like 20-some years ago, and I don't know how many of those I've signed. And so it's a thing I wrote. And basically what I meant was that these bands, they don't know how easy they have it just to be able to walk on stage. Because when I was in Black Flag, we were beaten with sticks and made to walk 10 miles through the mud for breakfast, which was a slap in the mouth. But we also had our own PA. So we were the road crew, and every day I'd load that system in. We wouldn't let Greg Ginn load, because one day he fell with an amp and hurt his hand. We said, we can't have your hands hurt. You're no longer allowed to carry gear. So me and some other people, we carried the gear in the back line, the PA, stack it, juice it, light it. After the show, I'm still sweating. I'm breaking down the gear. I'm loading the back of a truck. And I did that for years and years. And I kind of have an idea of what it takes. And so I got nothing but respect for people who do it for a living. Makes you strong. This question basically asks... Oh, sorry?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. No problem.
Your show tonight, and I work at Stage.
And so you know. Yeah, well, yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for your hard work. This question, I think I can read it with my bad eyesight. You can see what my vision is like. Who's your biggest influence or teacher for you to speak your mind no matter how difficult the opinion or something may be or issues it may cause? As a kid, I was very meek because I had a father who yelled and he terrified me. I had my mother's boyfriends who were very mean and they terrified me, and kids at school scared me. And so I was basically just a receptor of angst. And I was also on Ritalin, so I was just kind of quaking all the time. And so basically what I didn't know, that I was basically a bowstring being pulled back for years. And then puberty hit me. I stopped taking the Ritalin, kind of rebelled against the regimen. And all of a sudden, music started talking to me, and the wild oats hit me, and I started getting very angry. And it was Ted Nugent records, Led Zeppelin, like, FM rock of my day. I put those records on, I go like, okay, Misty Mountains, girls, cars. It's not addressing my issues, man. And then I heard Joe Strummer of The Clash, who taught me to question authority. And I heard Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols, who's angrier than anybody I'd ever heard on a record. And it was terrifying and illuminating. I heard the Ramones, who looked like these 4 losers who couldn't get into the party. And I figured I could be the 5th Ramone because I was a loser who couldn't get into the party. And all of a sudden I had an insignia on my shield. My life had a soundtrack, and it was punk rock. And it was either the Ramones saying, I don't want to hang out, I want to hang out with the girls in the loony bin, Dee Dee's lyrics, or I want to question any authoritarian or any system of authority. That was Joe Strummer. Or, screw you, man, Sex Pistols. And it just kind of flipped my script. And I realized I could question authority. So I went to a school that had a lot of ex-military as teachers, and I'm not putting that down. But it was a school for, if your kid is an upstart in class, we'll cool his ass out. You pay us the money, we will discipline your kid. That's the school I got sent to, where you talk out of class, the teacher picks you up and chucks you across the room. And so my teachers were ex-Paris Island, ex-Army, Navy, and they were quite authoritarian. And I just kind of went, okay, I didn't say a word. The Ritalin helped. But it made me mad. And so it was Joe Strummer that gave me the guts to start going, well, why not? How come I can't do that? I can't go there just because you say so? I don't know if I ever would have come to those conclusions had it not been for punk rock. And so my biggest influences were those records, and also my best friend Ian Mackay, who was the first person I knew of our age group who had his own opinion about things. Like, I'd say, Ian, we're all going to do this tomorrow. He's like, well, I'm not. Like, but the whole gang is going to do it. He's like, yeah, but you're going to do something stupid, and it sounds boring, and I'm not going. We're like, but we're all doing it. How come you're breaking away? He's like, because I have my own opinion. And by the next summer, every day we go to Ian's house. What are we doing today, Ian? He became the leader because he had his own opinion. And I was like, he can think for himself. I better try that. And I kind of learned that from hanging out with Ian every day of every summer until I left for Black Flag. And so between Ian and punk rock formed a lot of my, opinions, or the ability to have opinions going forward. And then I got in Black Flag, where everyone tells you you suck, and I just got super mad. And then I started just like doing it as loud as I could. Country that you tried to get into and failed. The one country I tried to get into and failed was Sudan, like Khartoum. And it was Steve and Rita, my friends in foreign service who were living there. And Steve wrote me from Khartoum. He said, Khartoum. I said, dude, hook me up. I so want to get to Khartoum. And apparently the government is very moody. They like you 1 week, and then they're mad at America another week. So the visa would come up, it almost would go through, and then it would not go through. And then Steve and Rita rotated to another country. And so I lost my window of opportunity to get into the northern part of Sudan that practices Sharia law, nothing like South Sudan. And so that was the one place I tried and couldn't get into. Otherwise, Iran was a multiple attempt. Like one time, Road Manager Ward and I were in Australia, and I think you said, we got your visa for Iran, and then it fell through at the last minute. And that's when I got the information that if you go to Dubai, you can probably get one in 90 minutes. So I went to Dubai because they thought I wouldn't go to Dubai to get a visa. So I did, and I got a visa in about 90 minutes. Here's a question, and this question comes up quite often in my life. It's come up. In this present political climate, do you think it will lead to better or worse art? And I think it goes back to the idea that the Vietnam War, at least that's a war that's kind of was in my lifetime and perhaps relevant for you in your lifetime, as in you might not have been alive for it, but you know of it. That is said to have led to a lot of incendiary rock and roll. The Detroit music scene, the MC5 were pushing against it. The Stooges you hear Vietnam imagery in Stooges songs, like especially on Raw Power, Love in the Middle of a Firefight, Search and Destroy, a Heart Full of Napalm. So there are Vietnam references. And so you hear people protesting the war on stage. Jefferson Airplane, etc., etc. Jimi Hendrix, The Star-Spangled Banner, where you hear people in war, things crashing, his song Machine Gun. And so these are young people having an artistic reaction to conflict. And I think a lot of our models going forward reacting to conflict through music comes from that 1968-69 model. And so during the Iraq War, I got questions like, do you think there'll be great music because of this war? And maybe this question is coming from the current political climate, which would mean our current president, who is stirring up quite a bit of Sturm und Drang in this country. Some people dig him, some people not so much. And either way you fall on that, I welcome you to my show. I don't think necessarily tough times will give you good art. I think it is possible. I just don't think that artists are responsible for time of war, I must write a political song. I think you don't have to do that. If you want to write about cars and girls or whatever you want to do, rock and roll, while a country around you is having quite a time, I don't think you should have to do anything. I don't think you should make a painting that addresses a political issue just because you have a paintbrush. I don't think that's your damn job. I think you should express yourself as you see fit. However, I think that more and more, as more young people are becoming of voting age, right around now, I am noticing in music, and especially in street art in Los Angeles, it is very reactant to the Trump administration. I'm seeing it in the artwork of Shepard Fairey, who's a good buddy of mine. His new display exhibit was called Damaged. It was unbelievable, best thing he's ever done. We were very reactive to the Trump campaign. I look at a lot of street art anywhere I can, and I'm seeing that this country is reacting artistically to this president and to Congress. And so will it lead to better or worse art? I think at any time you have great art and you have a boatload of crap, because unfortunately anyone can buy a guitar and churn out the most mediocre, dire crap and put it on a record. And that's, go to Sony, they got 8 truckloads of it for you right now. If you want the good music, you go to the independent labels like In the Red and what John Dwyer's doing over at Castle Face Records, etc., Discord, Mike Patton's label, Ipecac, etc. And so I think in the next few years you're going to see some great art, because I think artists are agitated. When artists get agitated, I think it leads to nothing but good results. Even if the result isn't great music, at least they got them off their ass and did something. And so those were all of the questions. And so this, in closing, this photo thing that we did tonight is this thing I've been wanting to do for a while. It's making its maiden voyage as a tour. This is night 2. And we had no idea how it was going to go. So every night we go out and do this show, hoping it's going to work. We did this a couple of nights in Australia last year, 2016, and it did well. And I did it one time at a university in upstate New York a few weeks ago, one time at the National Geographic Theater in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. Very different photos. And so hopefully it translated and it didn't go too long. I looked at my stopwatch, 2.5 hours. I wanted to run out and apologize to everyone for 3 additional hours. But so hopefully it was cool. And thank you for showing up, and thanks for hanging out with me after the show. And I hope that our paths cross somewhere down the road. Good night, and thanks again.